I took this old and moldy dragon fruit and this old and moldy jackfruit and placed them both in pots to see if I could 10x them and grow hundreds of little plants. Now, I know normally you'd probably throw them away, but I want to prove to you that their purpose is actually not the garbage to die, but the garden to thrive and survive. Plus, becoming a mother is way more rewarding than disposing of old and moldy fruit. I forgot I even had these fruits, and 3 weeks after planting them, some interesting things started to happen. Let's first start with the dragon fruit. Now, dragon fruit grows into cacti, so I was determined to grow a full-blown desert in my backyard. After I placed it in that pot, I continued to water it 3 times a day and kept it in a really sunny spot. And just 3 weeks later, I went out to the garden to do my daily sprout baby check and saw one little tiny lucky cactus starting to sprout. And as time started to pass even more quickly, before I knew it, 3 more weeks had passed. And every day I checked on the soil, soon to see a literal ecosystem starting to grow in that tiny pot, as you can so clearly tell by this worm making itself nice at home in the pot, and lots of creepy crawlers in which I wasn't even sure what they were called. But I knew that movement meant that seedlings would start to move and grow too. Worms can either be beneficial or detrimental, but in this case, I was hoping they would provide more aeration, nutrients, and overall a great house for a tiny cactus baby or babies starting to grow and get bigger as each day passed. But before we could get hundreds of baby cactus friends, something
spicy
happened. It started raining a lot, 30% chance. And you know what happens when it rains in Canada. The squirrels unite, and before I knew it, a squirrel, or
an entire family of squirrels,
came and made some holes in our soil and ate some of our children. As upset as I was that some were eaten, I was thankful that the squirrels didn't eat all of the children, and I quickly covered the holes with more soil and added some survival sticks this time that were pretty sharp in the hopes that it would repel the squirrels and save the lives of our hundreds of babies trying their best to grow. And you know what? I wasn't even upset yet because the babies weren't big enough for them to all be gone, and if this was gonna work, those dragon fruits had like hundreds, if not thousands, of tiny seeds. So I was ready for them to really start popping up, and I was assuming that they were about to sprout out in abundance. And indeed, I was right. It was a success because these things started to thrive more each day. And soon, we had hundreds of little babies. So since winter was fast approaching, I foraged the little cacti seedlings that were buried in the soil and placed them in a pot. I allowed them to grow for about 2 more months until it was just too cold to keep them outside, and then I brought them inside and had them live in my grow box for the winter months. They grew, and I was really excited of the progress of our little babies. After about 4 months, I made the executive decision to repot them in their own little individual pots so that they would have more room to grow and therefore could grow faster as a result. And before I knew it, they were so big and the summer came back around. So I brought them back outside and let them live there. By now, there were so many sharp edges on these little plants that the squirrels had no chance at these because they would poke them when they would try to eat them. And I actually placed them around my other potted plants as a barrier to entry, hoping it would deter them from eating my other plants, but I won't get into that right now because we gotta stick to the story. They lived in these little pots for the entire summer until about 5 months later, it started to get cold again. So I washed the roots of the cacti with water and a little drop of dish soap added to that to remove any pests in the soil, pulled all the little pricks stuck in my fingers, and then repotted them into this cute little glass drinking container turned plant pot and brought them inside to live in their little corner. So far, it's been a year, maybe even more. It's hard to keep track, and I've just kept them inside. They have shown some interesting growth, to say the least. But they are thriving, and I know most of you are probably thinking, okay, I should have brought them back outside so that they can grow properly, but there is never a proper way to grow plants in Canada because there just isn't enough sun and not enough summer for any proper fruit plants to thrive. So I'm happy with the progress of these skinny little cacti babies, and this is clearly just proof in the pudding that plants are all trial and error, because our dragon fruit experiment really worked, even through the roadblocks along the way. And the moral of this dragon fruit story is that you should never throw your old and moldy fruits out, but rather grow them instead. And you're now probably thinking, well, Mom, what ended up happening to the old and moldy jackfruit? Well, first of all, After that emotional roller coaster, let me get into the story of the old and moldy jackfruit plant. Jackfruits can reach up to 80 pounds. They're the largest tree-borne fruit in the world, and when you cut into them, the fruit excretes an extremely sticky substance, like a latex, from the rind and the fibrous part of the fruit. You might even damage your utensils, but you can remove it with coconut oil if you're ever doing this at home, which I learned the hard way after multiple attempts at growing full jackfruits. But you know what? I didn't really care how sticky my hands got because I was just excited to have the opportunity to grow a jackfruit tree in my very own backyard. So, I just placed it right in some soil. I didn't even need to fully touch the fruit and my fingers got extremely sticky, but I covered it up with more soil and waited 3 months for it to grow. The first 3 weeks seemed like nothing was really happening because there was no progress, and I was pretty confused because in the past when I've grown jackfruit, it grows so quickly, and the seeds all have like a 95% successful germination rate, so I just waited, and soon 2 more months passed and we finally had a sprout. But this wasn't any normal jackfruit sprout. This is what looked like to be an onion sprout. So mine and my little garden helper's question became, should we pull it to see what this is? Before I did that, I waited a while and soon it started to flower. And that's when I knew an onion must have gotten stuck in there. How? I couldn't tell ya, but I just know that this is how onions sprout and flower. And it was not in fact a jackfruit because soon our plant looked like this and I was really confused. And I was really kind of sad because we were so successful with the dragonfruit, only to be met with such disappointment from this jackfruit plant because it quite literally did not grow at all. I guess the seeds were just too moldy and way too far gone for them to have any chance at sprouting, so they probably likely disintegrated into the soil and became fertilizer. It is true that sometimes planting old fruit can cause germination rates to plummet, taking way longer than desired to grow, but you already know on this channel we try what's difficult. And I just can't throw any fruits out without growing them, or at least trying to. So I was ready for the rates to plummet, to say the least. I just didn't even expect not even one to grow. What a jackfruit seed really looks like when it comes to germination of them is a little something like this. And when you plant those in soil, the plant becomes such a beautiful porcelain plant. I would continue to repot it when it outgrew its pot, kept them in a sunny spot, and soon the plant eventually became a little something like this. But again, living in Canada makes it so hard to fully grow fruit-bearing trees, and I don't have enough space in my backyard where I'm able to plant it in the ground, so far I have not had any success in growing the jackfruit tree of my dreams because it's bound to this pot. But that in no way means that I will not continue to try. So listen, this story was a tale of triumph, trial and error, a legend of a slow-burning progress and always a learning experience. So I think you know exactly what I had to do. I got some more old and moldy fruit to try growing some more fruiting plants and trees.